Parkinson's really is kind of like a disease where you feel uncomfortable in your own body. When I first started running this spring, my head was bobbing a lot, and I could still see I had Parkinson's. But there's times now that I don't have any head bob at all, and that's when I run the best, is when I maintain my form. So it's nice to get out there and do something where you feel normal. You feel like the rest of the crowd.
You know, when Mike started running again, you know, I saw a fire return in his eyes, and I honestly had no idea that he would get this far back.
The running's really made a big difference as far as my Parkinson's symptoms. I've gotten a lot stronger. When I do have my good times, I feel more normal than I have for years.
We don't talk about his movements. You know, he has a lot of dyskinesia, and to see him running and apparently not having it, he runs like he used to run. He looks like himself. That's so good.
One of the reasons why I decided to do this fundraiser this year was I wanted to let people know that what Parkinson's was all about, and that people could see the symptoms of Parkinson's and see that at times I move a lot, sometimes I slow down, but I'm out there battling it and doing the best I can. And I think the awareness of what Parkinson's does to people will help raise funds for research. So I'm willing to put myself out there just to raise funds and see if we can get a cure for this. Because I've got a brand new granddaughter who was born about a month and a half ago. And if there's a genetic link, I don't want her to have to deal with Parkinson's in her life. I want her to live a full life the way she wants to live it. And the sooner we get rid of Parkinson's, the better.
How do I wake my spirit cold? We always say when our history's told, if only we knew the things we know. There's a question ages old. Let me down easy, let me down slow.
You're gonna be so friggin' tough out there. Okay, yeah.
Things ever come and go. Let me back down in a place I know. Hold the nail for the hammer stroke.
The faster times can come some other marathon. If I finish in under 4 hours, I'll be happy. If I finish it all, I'll be happy.
This my blood, this my bone. How do I learn my dreams to know? To lay them bare in the morning cold.
When you live on an island, you don't have much choices to where you're going to run. The course is basically on the 2 mile stretch of roadway on Cranberry Island. I expect that most of my family will be on my mother's porch, which is the home that we moved into in 1970 when I was 13 years old, and it'll be something to look forward to on every 4 miles.
In a place I know. Hold the nail for the hammer stroke. This my weapon. This my home. This my blood. This my bone.
I felt good through about 20 miles, and then I think my medications kind of dropped off for a little bit.
And he said, I'm losing the connection, between my, brain and my muscles.
Once again, Mike is about to come on through. Awesome job, Mike. Mike is currently in second place in the marathon. He is in second place. 3 miles to go under 3:07 at 23:2.
What's happening was the signal was not getting to my legs, and my mind and my body wanted to move forward. My legs weren't cooperating, so I kept feeling like I was going to fall forward.
He could have very easily stopped with 3 or 4 miles to go and said that was it, that he couldn't push his body any farther, that it was being uncooperative, and no one would have faulted him for that.
He will be here in just a moment. He needs 3 hours and 40 minutes to qualify for Boston. 3 hours and 40 minutes. And there is plenty of time on the clock for that to happen.
You got to push yourself. You got to push beyond what you think you can do. If you limit yourself, you might as well just pack it in. I think you just give up, and it's too easy. It's too easy to give up. You got to make yourself do it.
To have run all that way and then to have had a problem and to get up and do it again. It just showed his spirit and his motivation to finish.
Absolutely amazing night. The whole island is cheering for you. He's breaking that tape.
I have to say that you just have to live your life and do what you can do to make it a full life. And you only got a certain amount of time here. Don't wait for those golden years, because those golden years might not come. And the years go by quick. And the older you get, the quicker the years go by. The way I figure it is it's just one big blur if you don't try something new and make some memories. So this was big on my list. I don't think I'll ever forget this experience.
It's hard to see your children have this happen to them, and but it's good to see them dealing with it and going on with their lives. Right.
I've got Parkinson's, but I think in the last year through the running, I think I've kind of slowed it down a little bit, and I've gotten back a lot of what I've lost, and it's something I love to do, and I don't think I'll ever stop now, because I want to prolong this feeling of life. Running to me has been a big part of it, and if I can inspire people to get out there and do something, they don't have to run a marathon. They can just get out and do what they love. Their life is going to be a little more joyful. That's about it.
My name is Jerry Bowers, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs here at the MDI Biological Laboratory. And it's my pleasure to be able to create this opportunity to share Michael's story and to truly give credit to Peter for putting together such a wonderful video and sharing Michael's story in such a compelling way. As Kevin mentioned, one of the things that we do here at the MDI Biological Laboratory is really try to engage the public in our work as much as possible. So when we learned about Michael's story, we just really appreciated the opportunity to partner with him in raising visibility and awareness about life with Parkinson's, and also a little bit about the current research that's happening in regard to how we can perhaps extend healthy lifespan and prevent some of these diseases that we typically associate with aging. So tonight, what we want to do is just create an open dialogue and have a conversation exactly about those issues. So talking about life with Parkinson's, talking about where current research is headed. And so I'd love to invite you guys down, and we could start a question and answer discussion, both about the film and about Michael's story and about the science. So come on down. So the lights are pretty bright on these guys. You may want to dim them down a little bit. So I'm going to ask, first of all, that you try to use the microphone if you can, because we do have an online audience. My guess is maybe that's what part of the technical issue was, but I feel like these guys probably don't need a whole lot of introduction. We met Peter through Kevin's introduction. And certainly I feel like we all know Michael now since we've seen this beautiful video. But for those of you that don't know, Michael grew up, spent the majority of his childhood on Great Cranberry Island, and graduated from MDI High School, and then went on to be a graduate of the University of Maine, and during that time was a competitive runner, but not just any competitive runner. He just set some amazing records running a 4-minute, 19-second mile while he was in college. So this is not your average runner, certainly not by my standard anyway. He took a little break from running after he got married and was raising his family and attending to his business, and was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2006. And I think just recently, in 2013, was inspired by his good friend Gary Allen to start running again. And so you heard a little bit about that story and the successful outcome. So I'm really, thrilled for him in that regard. And then Dr. Aric Rogers joined the MDI Biological Laboratory as an assistant professor in 2013. And prior to coming here, Aric was at the Buck Institute for Aging, and he received his PhD at University of Massachusetts Amherst. And so in his work here at the Biolab, Kevin alluded to it a little bit, but what he is studying is really increasing healthy lifespan and understanding the genetic mechanisms that underlie that. Why do we become more susceptible to some of these diseases as we age? And so Aric and his team are making some really interesting findings in that regard. So I'm sure you all have questions, and I would love to try to facilitate some of those. So just open it up to the audience if you have any questions. Any takers, first ones? Yes.
I am wearing a Boston U jacket. My son did participate in the Boston Marathon, and he was taken off mile 17. This was the jacket of the bombs, where I was 3 blocks from the bombs at the time. Lifestyle is important. Diet is definitely important, and exercise. And I think if we all do those things, we will all live longer. I don't want to push Dr. Oz, but about 1.5 years ago, we heard about something that he was pushing called chaga, C-H-A-G-A. Look it up. Okay, it's something that helps remove antioxidants and helps you with your whole body. And I've been taking that since last June. And I'm going to be 79 in January. And my diet and a little walking. And I applaud you for your effort. And my husband, who died of Alzheimer's, he died in 2011, and he ran until 2009 with Alzheimer's. and I applaud you.
Anyone else have questions for our panel? I know we have some runners in the audience. We have some folks.
Great job, Peter. Again, it's so amazing to see your film and have everybody do this. And Mike, I guess, you know, you and I've ground out a few miles over the years, and I think we got a few more miles in us. I
Couple
don't
more.
see either one of us stopping anytime soon. So I know you're running Boston, as am I, and there perhaps are others in the room that are. Do you have in your mind a time goal? Are you looking forward to sort of lowering the time that you ran at Cranberry, or you're just going to run through
The
it?
competitive part of me says yes.
Yeah,
I'm very competitive. I got to slow myself down sometimes.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking to try to. I'm running the MDI marathon in October, and try and go down about 3:25, and then at Boston maybe get down to 3:15.
Nice.
We'll see
nice.
how it goes.
So for all of you, Mike is in fact running Boston, but he's also running the Mount Desert Island Marathon on October 18th. So I would encourage you to go out and watch him go in person. It's really an amazing thing to see. Thanks.
We need a big MDI cheering section for sure.
Thank you very much for the presentations today. I was curious about the connection between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and what does the science say about that now?
That's your area. I got nothing.
That's a great question, and actually it sort of it gets the heart of sort of our approach. There are lots of ways to look at these diseases. You can look at specifically what goes wrong with a particular disease. Unfortunately, it's not always exactly the same cause. Sometimes you can have different sets of genes that lead to these, and that makes trying to find treatments and therapeutics challenging if you really want something that's going to work for everybody. So the one thing that some of these neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's have in common is that they are something called protein folding disorders. And this means basically that the proteins that you have in your cells, they adopt a certain shape. If they are misshapen, sometimes they can begin to aggregate. And this is where we think the problem comes. And eventually this leads to the kind of plaques and neurofibrillary tangles that we see associated with these disorders. We don't know if it is those that are causing the pathology, but the wonderful thing about approaching this issue from that standpoint is our whole lives, we are able to manage our proteins no matter what our genetic predisposition is, no matter what our environmental exposure has been that may contribute to the disease. For most of our lives, we deal with it just fine. Something happens where we no longer are dealing with it just fine. And so there are very ancient, conserved mechanisms that basically keep your cells feng shuied. They keep your cells in order, intact, and balanced with regard to the buildup of these proteins. And the nice thing is we can use our animal models, which have these same, nature wastes nothing. And so if it works in a single cell, that is preserved throughout evolution. And we can tap into those cellular mechanisms and those genetic programs. And now we know from our animal models that we can actually slow the rate of aging. And that has obvious implications for age-related diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And what we are seeing in our very simple models, believe it or not, we have models. I work with a small microscopic nematode called C. elegans, and we actually have models for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And what we've seen are the genetic approaches that we take and environmental approaches that we take to delay aging or slow aging actually can delay or ameliorate the symptoms associated with these disease models that we have. So one of the things we do is very simple. We can take proteins that are associated with disorders like Parkinson's and Huntington's and Alzheimer's, and we can just go and express those. What we do is we express them in muscle rather than in neurons, and we get this wonderful effect that we can see very easily. The worms, just like humans, they live just fine, they reproduce just fine. They get to middle age, later age, and they become paralyzed because we've taken those proteins that cause toxicity in neurons and we put them into the muscle. And so it's an very easy thing for us to follow. It's also very rapid. So anything we do, any approach we take, a potential therapeutic approach that we take, we can test in a very short amount of time. And so it's through these conserved processes, these mechanisms that are meant to maintain protein balance in the cell, that what we hope is that we can find treatments that will help everybody, no matter what the underlying cause, the genetic or environmental predisposition may be.
Aric, can you, just a quick follow-up to that, but can you talk a little bit about the effects that you see in the lab of either dietary change or temperature change, what have you, how that affects the cell's ability to deal with damage?
Yeah, so Michael's story is great because one of the things that happens when you run, that is a stress on your body, but it's a temporary stress, and as long as you don't overdo it, it's a stress that you get past and that can actually make you stronger. And we know that from our muscles getting stronger and from us feeling better. But at the molecular and cellular level, we know that this is true also. And one of the really cool examples of how these sorts of things can be potentially therapeutic, or how our environmental influences may be therapeutic, is we know dietary restriction, various forms of dietary modulation can increase lifespan. And they touch on genes that are meant to improve survival and enhance survival. But we can also influence them in other ways. And one of the things we can do, we could exercise and even exercise a worm. But one of the simpler things we can do is just expose it to heat. Like you getting in a sauna, we can give the worm a 1-hour treatment at a temperature that is outside of its normal living range. And if you kept it, just like if you stayed in a sauna for 24 hours, it would kill you. If you left the worm for 24 hours, it would kill the worm. But if you just put it in for an hour, like you might do in a sauna, that one treatment, that single heat treatment, it's something that the worm can get over, just like you can with exercise or with your dip in the jacuzzi. That one treatment is enough to significantly increase not only the lifespan of the animal, but also its ability to withstand many forms of stress and improve its outcome with regard to these disease models. So basically anything you can throw at it, radiation, heat, toxins, anything, it actually becomes stronger. So there's a little truth to that adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, within reason. We think a little bit of stress is something that actually helps restore proper balance and homeostasis.
My name is Steve Bell, and I admire your spirit. I see you running in your film, and it reminds me of my day. In my day, we had polio, some of us, and I managed to get off my crutches and my brace for a while and learn how to ride a two-wheel bicycle. And, as a result of that, I had a good 25 years with a bicycle, and now I can still hike and swim with my wife, and and I admire that spirit. I hope long may you run, as that song says.
All right. Thank you. I admire your determination.
I have two questions. I'd like to ask Michael how and where he trains in the winter. And another question, question for Aric is what's the mechanism that the acute effects of exercise are suppressing his symptoms?
Well, I train right on that course, pretty much. It's the best plowed roads on the island. So, and it's traveled quite a bit too. So the snow and the ice wears away pretty quick. But the exercise seems to just. A lot of times I get slow periods where the medications aren't working, and that's when the Parkinson's is the worst. You just can't talk, and you stiffen up. And a lot of times when that happens, if I'm at work or if I'm doing something, I'll just go out and jog a quarter mile. And somehow or another that stirs things up. And pretty soon I get in a rhythm, and my legs start stretching out. Because when I first start, my knees are knocking together, and I'm just shuffling along. But give me a quarter mile, half mile down the road, and I'm raring to go.
Aric, did you want to respond to the mechanism question?
Yeah, so without getting into the gory details, basically what you're doing is you are activating a stress response mechanism at the cellular level. And it's something that if you activated it all the time, it wouldn't be good. That's chronic stress. But if you activate it and then allow yourself to recover from that, it actually strengthens that response for anything else that you encounter, including just day-to-day function of the cell.
I hope Gary's listening. He pushes me every day. We get out and runs, and he'll say, "Let's go in easy, 6 miles." And 10 miles later, we're just going 7-minute pace. So,
Mike, I was actually just thinking, I don't know why we don't run back to Northeast.
I gotta take a few more meds.
As we speak, though, Mike, there's a meeting going on in the park. We can't run through the park.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Go through Otter Creek.
Yeah.
So Peter, I think you're getting off way too easy here, and I have a couple questions for you. I'm curious, number one, sort of how you decided that you wanted to choose documentary film as the style of film that you wanted to make, and then two, at what point did you know that this is what you wanted to do as a career?
Well, I'm definitely not limited to documentary. It seems like that's what I've been making the most of recently, but I like doing narrative stuff as well, and I'm going to do more and more of that as I move forward. But I think what I really like about doing documentaries is that I have my camera and I can show up, and like in the case with Michael, I went out to Cranberry Island and we set up my camera, and I think we had like an hour-long interview where I just asked a few questions. We always had a conversation, and then I just hung out for a while and was able to get footage of him working and running and doing different things. And then, the day of the marathon, I just showed up with no idea what was going to happen that day and just was able to document everything. And then the challenge in documentary is then, you've assembled all these pieces and then you have to figure out how they're going to fit together. So, it's a fun challenge, and I like the fact that you can just kind of show up with your camera and be there and be present and react to what's happening, and then try to turn into something that captures the energy and the essence of that day. And for me, I've always, really loved telling stories, and I guess it was 5-6 years ago when it became clear to me that what I'm most drawn to is filmmaking and that medium of being able to, capture something and then piece it together and then put it out there for the world. And I love doing events like this where I'm able to share my work and have people learn about a story like Michael's that hopefully they can gain something from on a personal level, and that's why I do what I do.
We've got a bunch of questions tonight. You mentioned diet. Well, as I age, I know that I don't have a disease now, but as I age, I realize that I'm picking up more weight. I can't eat as much. Even though I exercise 2 or 3 times a week, I gain weight. So
I got a solution
you
for that. You get
mentioned-
Parkinson's and you're moving all the time. I'm down to 121 pounds.
Yes, I noticed you were very thin. But
I'll work on it.
what is recommended for our diet as we age? I mean, do we give up all sugar? Are sugary carbohydrates bad? I mean, you hear all types of different things.
I have to be careful. I mean, I'm not a dietitian, at least not for humans. But there's a lot of research, and I paid very close attention to this because forms of dietary restriction are something that we use in the lab and study very, very closely in the lab. In fact, we look at how every single gene is changing. The activity of every single gene is changing at multiple different levels. So we really want to understand this, and it's super important because obviously diet is one of these things that we all have control of right now. There are attempts right now to make dietary restriction mimetics, basically drugs that will mimic the health benefits of being on certain diets that would be very difficult to follow. Dietary restriction, as the name implies, means you're restricting something. It doesn't have to be calories. It might be the ratio of protein to carbohydrate that you take in and that sort of thing. As far as gaining weight, as you get older, that is normal. That's actually somewhat healthy if you're otherwise living a healthy lifestyle. It's a good thing, as long as it's not indicative of some other issue with the hypothalamus or something like that. But yeah, diet is something that people are experimenting. I mean, we have more experiments going on right now in the human population than we have in all of the labs looking at different animal models, because there are hundreds of diets out there and everybody's trying everything from Atkins to Hollywood to whatever else is out there.
Yeah. I got a shot at this. Pancakes. They're great. Yeah.
So basically what we're learning is common sense is the right approach. There is now, we understand at a molecular level why things we have known for decades, the common sense about having a balanced diet, getting from lots of different food sources, not eating too much. We now understand that if we overfeed, we are feeding pathways that we shouldn't be feeding, growth-related pathways, things that can contribute to cancer and potentially accelerate the onset of other age-related diseases. So it is hugely important, I think, to pay attention to. I'm not going to advocate any particular diet here, but paying very close attention to that is, I think, going to be key. It's one of the most potent, powerful lifestyle aspects of our lifestyle that can give us control over our health.
Aric, I learned this summer that one of the interests of your lab is not only longevity, but length of health or health span. And I found that really extremely interesting. So I wonder if you might elaborate a bit about the importance of the dietary things that you were talking about, stressors, intermittent stressors, or whatever, and training, all of these variables that we have been touching on recently, and how they have an impact on health span versus just longevity.
Yeah, almost anything that we do to increase lifespan, again, whether it's environmental through exposure to sublethal forms of stress, or exercise or whether it's direct genetic intervention, almost any of these things increases health span. And one of the first ways we see that is increased stress resistance. We know we can withstand more stress when we're younger, and that's true in the laboratory. And that's what I mean by slowing aging. We're not just doing things in our organisms to increase lifespan. We actually think that we are slowing the rate of aging, and so everything increases. The healthy span of life increases, but it's also possible that you will spend more time in decline, although it might be a higher quality decline relative to not doing anything for health. So yeah, we are very much interested right now. We've known for a couple of decades that there are ways to extend lifespan, and now the emphasis on how can we find the parameters to really nail down how we're affecting health span. And so this is something, again, it's not as easy in a worm as it is with a human, but we are trying to nail these things down because we really want to understand, well, what about mobility, the ability to get out and move around? What about neural function? How are all of these things being affected? And right now, the news is good. It looks like anything you do, to do things to increase lifespan is going to increase healthful lifespan. But it's something that obviously nobody wants to live another 40 years if it's in an iron lung. So health span is and quality of life is hugely important, and we are making some real attempts now to address that in our animal models.
I'm going to adapt my lifestyle here today, apparently.
Thank you. First of all, Peter, wonderful job on the movie. Just what a great story of the human spirit that you were able to tell in such a short time. My compliments on how well you did in that. And I'm looking forward to see some more of your work. And Michael, brilliant what you've done. And I wanted to just point out that you also have a great support group.
What's that?
And a support group, the people that help you and emotionally and physically and root for you along the way, those people are very important. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's March the 12th, 2009. I think everybody remembers the date that they were diagnosed. And I'm doing my own kind of battles. I've found that the support group is awfully important too. And I commend you on the support group you have. You must be a heck of a guy because you've got some really good friends. And Aric, I wanted to ask you, I'm involved with a number of clinical trials going on at Johns Hopkins right now. And I like doing clinical trials and giving back and helping what I can in the research. Do you do any clinical trials around here involving humans? And if so, do you have any openings? And before you, I'll be very short. The other thing is that we got involved with Parkinson's was the pedaling for Parkinson's. And the repetitions of the pedaling and how over and above just the exercise, that activity has shown to be beneficial as well. Can you address that?
With regard to the first one, no, unless you are a microscopic nematode. I can't enroll you in. I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm a basic research scientist. Although my mom thinks that I've played a doctor my entire life, so she's. And then the second question about pedaling, I wasn't sure I quite got that.
There's an outfit out of Chicago or Minneapolis. I forget. It's the Midwest someplace. It's called Pedaling for Parkinson's. And I forget his name. But anyway, it's sort of anecdotal. He was a bicyclist, a road bicyclist. And he found that some of his patients benefited from pedaling. And at first they thought that it was the exercise. And through some more research over the years, they found that the repetitive motion of the pedaling, when it's at a high rate, a high cadence, has beneficial effects for Parkinson's as well.
I've read about that.
Yeah. We did
They've done tandem bicycles.
Hmm?
You know, people they get on tandem bicycles, and the healthy person gets on the front, and the person with Parkinson's gets on the back, and they've got to keep pedaling to keep up with the person in front.
That's right, and it's the rate.
And it's forced exercise.
Mhm.
And I do it by just get out there and making myself do it. and you're right, the rhythm part of it is just like striding. You know, once you
Well,
get, once
if
you
I
get,
had your strength and stamina, I could drive and you could pedal. How's that?
So Michael, just speaking about drive, what you've accomplished almost seems sort of superhuman, but I'm sure you have those days where you just don't feel like going out and running, and I'm just curious what you say to yourself to motivate you and keep you going.
This past year, it's been very easy to motivate myself. It's more like I want to go out and run every day, but sometimes I can't. You know, you get dead legs. After I ran that marathon in June, a week later I went a 10-miler up in Bucksport, and I was completely drained. So I couldn't get out and train as much as I wanted to. But you know, it's easy to motivate yourself when you've got so much going on, and it's fun. So, plus I've got a whole crew of running friends now that are just supporting me.
Hi, I'm Karen Cushman, and again, yes, Peter, great film, and really appreciate the three of you sharing the evening with us. Michael, I'm curious, just based on what Jerry just said, for someone that's newly diagnosed with Parkinson's and maybe hasn't found that thing that helps them keep going. I know from the short time we've spent together that there was a period of time for you where you have to come to the realization of what you're dealing with, and Jerry alluded to that, and I know you go through it a little bit, like you just said, after running. But can you recall back, the first year or two, and what type of advice you might give to somebody that is struggling with finding their way and how to find their strength again?
Well, I think the first when I first diagnosed, I kind of didn't believe it, because to me Parkinson's was something where you couldn't, you have trembly hands, and I at the time I could hold my hands out, and I could do things with my hands, and they weren't shaking at all. You find out pretty quickly that Parkinson's affects people in all different ways. I mean, everybody's symptoms are different, and so you kind of got to deal with the symptoms that you've got. But as far as the realization, what was the other part of your question?
Well, just really the realization. I have a good close family friend who was just diagnosed, and it's really early, and he's not an athlete at all, so I'm just curious how he's going to find his own path.
Well, you gotta find something. You gotta just realize you're going to live with this until there's a cure. And I just decided to take a positive attitude, and just say that I wanted to live a full life and do what I wanted to do, and running. I found running right away. Eventually I found running that made me feel normal, and that I could do it. And so if you got something you love to do and you can do it, you better take advantage of it. You can't sit there and be a victim. You got to be proactive.
Well, I think just building on that for this person, maybe it is just getting outside and being more active, but I think for you, that sense of freedom of running outside is something that you're gaining in addition to the repetitive motion that is beneficial. And then I just had a question for Aric. So I'm curious, how do you exercise a worm?
Well, they squiggle like this, and that's, that movement is dependent on, they have to have some traction. If you put them in liquid, there's no traction, but they're still going to try to get traction, and so then they're doing this instead of doing this.
Now, I apologize in advance because this may not be a question anyone can answer, but I'm curious whether the fact that Mike was such an experienced runner in the past meant that you had an automaticity to your running that made you didn't really have to think about it once you got in the zone.
Muscle memory.
So you had the muscle memory, or there are different names for that,
Right.
but and the fact that everybody rode a bicycle practically when they were young means that that's an easy automatic memory to tap into. One of the things with Parkinson's is the difficulty in initiating movement, and I know and this is old medical memories of mine. I'm not an expert on.
I think the competitive running back in my past has helped a lot because in there you have to push yourself and you got to hurt yourself. I mean, it's no fun at the end of the marathon, and it's no fun at the end of a mile race either. And you learn to push yourself. And so, when I first started running, I was tired and it was difficult. But once I got 3 weeks into it, and I got some mileage down, it started coming to me again.
But do you think you could have done it if you had not been a runner in the past?
I think I could have done it if you had the drive to do it. I mean, I think it just takes. I was just lucky that I had that competitive past, and also I'm lucky that my Parkinson's doesn't seem to affected me. I mean, I can't think of it. I don't think everybody can run long distance. I don't think expect everybody should, but I just consider myself lucky to be able to do it. So.
I have a question about research about the environmental triggers for these diseases.
Well, with Parkinson's, for a long time referred to as idiopathic, meaning it seemed to just be spontaneous. We now know that there are certain sets of genes, variations in certain genes that are linked to it. Environmental exposures definitely play a role. The set of cells that is affected, these dopaminergic neurons, are very sensitive for some reason. They seem to be more sensitive than many other cells, including other types of neurons, to environmental exposures to things like pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. There's some evidence for heavy metals. So around here we got arsenic in our wells. I mean, the evidence isn't 100% on that, but it's definitely one of these diseases where certain environmental exposures are considered to be a major contributing factor in a substantial number of cases.
I had a friend and neighbor where I lived down in Florida. He lived there year-round, and he took care of my place when I'm not there. He had Parkinsonism for 26 years, and he just kept going and doing his work, and toward the latter years, but he was on meds, and apparently they must have worked, and maybe being in Florida, being a warmer climate, might have had some effect of his longevity. But just up until the last couple of years, he basically managed beautifully. Sometimes he'd stumble and fall and pick himself up and go and hurt himself because he did a lot of maintenance type of thing. But speak about the meds that are available. Aric.
So speak about which meds are available now, and is that the question?
Actually, Michael might be able to answer this better. There are things you can do to manage the symptoms. There is nothing that cures right now. L-Dopa has been around for a very long time, which basically allows you to resupply your loss of dopamine, this neurotransmitter that you begin to lose. And there are other dopamine agonists out there now that can be used, but these are sort of a temporary fix. The best thing you can do right now in the absence of a cure that involves actually regenerating these neurons is to minimize the loss. And so the types of things that we've talked about as far as staying physical and getting out, this pedaling and or running or whatever it is that you can do to stay physically active, you're constantly retraining. And there is no end to the importance of the influence you can have on your own, I think, neurons. And we see this again and again in animal models, even just the ability to sense things in the environment without them impacting you directly. Sensing food in the absence of eating it, like smelling it or seeing it, can have profound effects. So I think anything we can do to mitigate that, and right now there are some medications that definitely will help manage. But I think there's also lifestyle choices that can, there's evidence they play a major role in managing.
I'm currently on 4 medications. One's carbidopa levodopa, like Aric said, it's basically dopamine replacement. And I just started 2 weeks ago on a time release carbidopa levodopa, which kind of, so I don't have to take it. It kind of lasts longer, and it minimizes the ups and downs of the dyskinesia and then the slow periods. But I take other medications too, like ropinirole, which is an agonist, dopamine agonist, that acts like dopamine. And then there's Azilect, which is just one small pill a day, which is supposedly shown some effect in slowing the progression of Parkinson's. And then there's one amantadine, which I'm not sure what that is. It's a little red pill, and I just take it.
So we are approaching the 8 o'clock hour, or have reached the 8 o'clock hour, and I just wanted to throw a couple of statistics out there for you all to think about as you leave. We're going to give our panelists a chance to make some final comments here, but anyone have a guess as to the cost, the annual cost for treating Parkinson's in this country? Any guess? It's $14.4 billion in 2013. Any guess how much the federal government puts towards research in Parkinson's disease? $135 million last year. So less than 1% to the cost to find a cure for this disease. And so I would just sort of put that out there as something to think about. And when we talk about raising awareness to help speed the idea of finding a cure for this disease, if there's one thing, I'm certainly supporting amazing fundraising efforts like the one Michael has put forth are critical. And I think so the federal government statistic is $135 million. The Michael J. Fox Foundation last year contributed $70 million to research. So for one entity to contribute almost half is pretty impressive. But I would say that from our perspective, one key piece that each of you could do to help with this issue is that in September, when Congress reconvenes, they will be addressing the budget for the coming year. And so, reach out to your congressman and say how important it is to fund basic research, because that's really where we're going to be able to address this issue and speed this kind of research. So just, send them an email and let them know that it matters to you, because it really does have an impact. I think we spend a lot of time in Washington, and we're very, very fortunate here in Maine to have a great, very supportive congressional delegation. They understand, the power of this, and both Senator Collins and Senator King have been huge advocates for this kind of work, but it's a drop in the bucket, so we need to do more. Do you all have any sort of final comments that you want to share with the audience as we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, on that note, I would definitely encourage everyone to visit Michael's fundraising page, which is through Team Fox, the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And Michael can tell you exactly how to find that, but if you just Google Team Fox, Michael Westphal, I'm sure it'll take you there.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that should get it done. That's why I was, wanted to make this film in the first place, was to help him advance his fundraiser and to help more people learn about his story. I also wanted to say one thing when I was, getting into the story of Michael and everything, one song that really stood out to me was the song Spirit Cold, which is by a band called Tall Heights, one of my favorite bands. And I heard the song, you know, live version they had done, and it instantly resonated with me, with Michael's story and his, you know, ability to, you know, awaken his spirit again. And so I reached out to Tall Heights, a Boston-based band, and their licensing manager got back to me and said, you know, the guys had talked, and they're going to allow you to use the song for free. And actually, Tim and Paul of Tall Heights are both here tonight, so I just wanted to thank them again for allowing us to use the song.
And Spirit Cold is available on iTunes for download, right?
Yeah, Tall Heights, they're unbelievable, and just thanks again. And then beyond that, yeah, just thank you, Michael, for allowing me to, you know, the access to help tell your story. It's been a real privilege and an honor for me. So,
I want to thank Peter for all his hard work. I mean, it's all volunteer work, and he's just done a great job. When he first came to me about it, I was a little hesitant. I thought, well, my story's not that interesting. I mean, you know, but he made it into something very interesting. and I thank him for it. He's a very talented filmmaker.
Aric, any final comments for the audience?
I think this was a great event, and the reason that I joined this institute was because of its laser focus on aging and regeneration technology. And I feel like, you know, there's two ways to approach trying to improve health, delay or prevent or treat age-related disease. And one is what I've kind of talked about, which is strengthening the population of cells that you have. The other is to kickstart our regenerative capacity. We have this capacity. It's programmed in our genome. All we have to do is find the right switch to turn it back on, and to turn it back on in the right way. Between those two approaches, I really do feel like this is the future of aging and, you know, age-related research is going to be these two approaches. And so like I said, I think this was a great opportunity here to sort of showcase a portion of that tonight with you know, a real-world example, and that's why I'm here, and I'm grateful to be here, and thank you.
And I know that Michael has some final words that he'd like to share with the audience as well.
Yeah, I just want one more photo to show you. Hope you get up there. There you go. This is what I call a community embrace. It's the three on the left there. It's three generations: Beverly Sanborn, Sherry Sanborn, and her son Ben, and they were at the finish line. And it's my favorite photo from the day, because it shows what kind of support I had from the Cram Brown community and the running community, and a lot of people came up to me and said I inspired them that day. But I think that everyone's got the capacity to inspire. It's just a matter of getting out and stepping out beyond yourself. And whether you donate to a cause or whether you volunteer, just step out and make an effort. And you can do great things too.